Hi everyone, my name is Selena Shares. I am going to be presenting to you on whole group versus small group reading intervention in first grade. A little bit about me. I'm a graduate student at Morningside College and I have been since June 2017. I have taught first grade for 6 years and I did my completed it in 2011 at the University of Iowa. To start us off, the problem statement is that in the National Assessment of Educational Progress reading report card, it stated that 63% of the United States of America's fourth grade students are performing below proficient level in reading. And to be proficient in fourth grade, they said that you had to be able to organize and translate texts and show their comprehension of the text to make conclusions. So there is a big demand to aid these students in becoming proficient in reading. And if you have low reading scores, the impact of it is you then can struggle with oral reading fluency, your comprehension, student behavior in the classroom. It also is an increase in dropout rates in high school and possibly even an increase in incarceration rates. For my past research, something that came up frequently was the intervention of using fluency to aid these students who are below proficient in reading. Now, fluency is defined by Whitley by making a few errors in their reading and following punctuation cues. Now, many reading assessments use fluency as a benchmark tool. So it's not uncommon to essentially teach to the test and focus only on fluency. But really, that's only one piece of reading. Reading at a faster rate does not provide an advantage for reading comprehension, stated by O'Connor in 2018. Another past intervention was using a model called response intervention. Now, RTI is a process that's used by educators to help those students who are struggling with the skills. And there's 3 tiers. Tier 1 is when it covers the whole classroom, like everyone is receiving the same instruction. And tier 2 might be a small group of students with a specific, it's targeted instruction. And then tier 3 is giving that instruction to individual students specifically on something that they are working on. And then also in that, I've found very little research on the impact of a whole group intervention. O'Connor, Arnott, McIntosh, and Dodd, they studied some preschoolers, about 57 of them, who received a whole class reading intervention on phonological awareness. Then they gave them an assessment in phonological awareness skills and looked at their reading proficiency by the time these group of students, when they were in second grade. Those who received a whole class reading intervention on phonological awareness did not, the results were comparable to students who didn't even receive any intervention in preschool. So it's one little piece of research that shows how a whole group intervention does not have that large of an impact on a student's reading proficiency in the long run. There was a lot of research about small group interventions. Camps and Greenwood, they looked at comparing the effects of small group reading intervention for students that are in the secondary level and compared to students who had a whole group instruction. Students who had that small group instruction made a large amount of growth compared to the students who only received whole group instruction. So that is one piece where I showed me how small group instruction can be more of an impact than whole group instruction. All of this kind of aligns with the constructivist theory. Now, the constructivist theory emphasizes students don't directly gain knowledge on their own, and that they learn through experiences after a process of reasoning. students need to be given like a setup for optimal learning according to the constructivist theory. The mediator, or like the teacher, they need to provide these experiences based on students' prior knowledge so that it's a meaningful experience for them to be successful in. And that's kind of where that giving them that small group focused instruction can set them up for prime learning. So the purpose of this study was to find out the effects of whole class and small group reading intervention on students' reading proficiency. And as stated before, in 2017, the National Assessment for Educational Progress reported that less than 40% of fourth grade students could read proficiently in the nation. The low reading scores have an impact on their reading comprehension, their reading fluency, behavior, dropping out of school, and incarceration. What do you do when you have a classroom that's full of majority of the class is below proficient in reading? Is a whole group reading intervention going to have more of an impact or less of an impact than a small group reading intervention? There was little research on that, so that's why I really wanted to dive in on this question. So I predicted that when students were in a small group reading intervention, they showed more improvement in their reading proficiency than when students are in the whole group intervention. My variables were independent variables were the whole class reading intervention compared to the differentiated small group reading intervention, and the dependent variables were the students' proficiency on the assessments of nonsense word fluency, the word segmentation, and correct words per minute. In my class, I had 15, the participants of this study include 15 first grade students in my classroom. 40% of them were male and 60% female. They aged from 6 to 7 year old, and 50% were Caucasian, 35% Hispanic, and 15% Black. Now for the whole school, which is made of 220 students, 70% of them qualified to receive a free or reduced price for lunch. The materials I used in this study include, for instruction, I used the 95% phonological awareness materials, and to measure the students, I used FastBridge, nonsense word fluency, word segmentation, and correct words per minute. For the procedure of my study, I first started with giving my students, they participated in the quantitative test design approach. So that means like all 15 of my students participated in two phases. And the first, I did some baseline testing on those three benchmarks of nonsense word fluency, word segmentation, and correct words per minute. Then they participated in the first phase, where I had a whole group reading intervention where I taught 95% phonological awareness materials for 15 minutes every day for 30 school days. After that first phase was completed, then I did a mid-assessment, which also stood as a baseline for the second phase. And then the second phase, I did differentiated small group reading interventions for 15 minutes every day for 30 school days. And then after that 30 days was up, I did one more final assessment of those three benchmarks. For my data analysis of my quantitative test design approach, I use a paired sample t-test to compare student improvement from the baseline to the post-test of each phase. So since I had 3 assessments, I have 3 tables and 3 figures for you to look at. Here's where I have the CBMR, which stands for curriculum-based measure. That's the correct words per minute, where students are given a passage for 1 minute, and it counts the number of correct words they read. And here, sorry that my picture's kind of covering up the on the bottom, but this is the first one for CBMR. So CBMR was not statistically significant in overall. The control phase showed more growth from the baseline to the end of the control phase than the treatment phase. which was unfortunate. And then I have nonsense word fluency. Now, nonsense word fluency was where they were given 1 minute to read made up words that follow the CBC pattern, which is where there's short vowel words like tup and poff are examples that students read. And the nonsense word fluency was statistically significant. The control phase showed less growth from the baseline to the end of the control phase than the treatment phase. So there was a nice big jump on during the treatment phase. And then for my word segmentation, students were given a word and they had to tell me all the sounds in the word. For example, if I said pen, they would have to say p-e-n. And word segmentation was statistically significant. The control phase showed less growth from the baseline to the end of the control phase than the treatment phase. A very big jump there. So all in all, my hypothesis was not fully supported by all three measures. It was not supported by the CBMR measure, but it was supported by word segmentation and nonsense word fluency. Excuse me. The connection to past research shows how small group reading intervention does support the research on RTI, which is response to intervention, being an effective intervention. Within the RTI framework, all students receive the same core instruction, and if they're not meeting that reading benchmark, they're put into a small group that's targeted on a specific area that students are struggling in. So there's a need and urgency to increase that student proficiency in reading. And this is connected to my constructivist theory, because the constructivist theory is where people and children are to be guided in their learning experience to gain knowledge. And a specific small group formed based on students' needs supports the theory of constructivism. For example, within the study, I formed a small group to focus on word segmentation, because that was an area that they needed assistance in. So I was able to give them and set them up for that prime learning and focus on where they need, based on what they already know. The implications of this study include two implications for teachers and administrators: that teachers should be using a small group reading intervention when students are performing below proficient, rather than using a whole group reading intervention. Even if majority of your class is performing below proficient, small group interventions are going to have more of an impact on their reading proficiency. The limitations of this and recommendations of the study first include the small sample size. I only had 15 first graders. I recommend that this be done not only with first graders, but across grade levels, and include multiple buildings, include possibly even more than one district. That would be amazing. Another limitation was the short duration of this research. I recommend doing a longer time for each phase. And then also the assessments. I'm looking back on it now. I only did those 3 assessments, but if I did across grade levels, doing nonsense word fluency wouldn't be appropriate for 6th graders. So to accommodate that, I recommend doing the Fastbridge reading composite score, where it combines multiple assessments into one score to have them comparable across grade levels. And then I also recommend doing more research on what would be the best instruction for interventions. This study didn't really focus on that. It focused on the impact of a whole group versus small group instruction. But what about the actual instruction piece? What intervention is going to be the most important for those students at the time? Here are my references for my presentation today. And thank you for listening. I really appreciate the time that you sat down to listen to the whole thing. And here's my credits to the presentation slides template. Thank you. Goodbye.